Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's Archive presents China Urban Legends EP7 The Forbidden City. Hello everyone. Today's story takes place in Beijing's Forbidden City. The Forbidden City needs no introduction. The largest ancient palace complex in the world. 24 emperors lived here. Over 500 years. Tens of thousands of tourists visit every day, and during the daytime, it's bustling with activity. But at night, try staying inside after dark. Everyone who has spent any time in Beijing has heard the nighttime legends of the Forbidden City. Two stories are the most famous. The first is the 1992 paranormal photograph. A tourist took a picture, and when the film was developed, there was a woman in Qing dynasty court attire standing under the palace corridor. The second comes from the night guards themselves. During their midnight patrols, they sometimes see palace maids carrying lanterns walking ahead of them in the distance. These two legends have circulated for 20 or 30 years. Online, you'll find countless versions. Some say they're true. Some say they're fabricated by the Palace Museum to attract tourists. I've lived in Beijing for over a decade and asked several people who have worked inside the Forbidden City. Their answers were different from what you might expect. Not a single one claimed to have personally seen a ghost or a palace maid. But every one of them said the same thing: the Forbidden City at night, something is not right. Today I'm not going to talk about that 1992 photograph or the lantern-carrying maid. I'm going to tell you about my friend Old Zhou, and what he personally witnessed during his time working as a night security guard at the Forbidden City. It's not what you'd expect.
I joined the Forbidden City security team in 2017. I was 42 at the time, a former soldier, in good shape. Before that, I'd worked at a private security company for 7 or 8 years. I'd seen plenty of things. Security posts at the Forbidden City are hard to get. There are background checks, political reviews. But my military background helped me pass. On my first day, the team leader took us new recruits on a route orientation. We entered through the Meridian Gate, crossed the Gate of Supreme Harmony, passed the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Central Harmony, the Hall of Preserving Harmony. Then we turned west, past the Hall of Mental Cultivation, the Palace of Gathered Elegance, and finally stopped in front of a very small courtyard gate. The team leader said, "This area. On night shifts, don't come here. Remember, no night shift personnel are to enter this area." I asked why. He looked at me and said, "No reason. That's the rule." I didn't think much of it at the time. The Forbidden City is enormous, over 9,000 rooms. It's normal for some areas to be off-limits to visitors. I found out later that the courtyard was called Shoan Palace.
Shoan Palace is located on the western side of the Forbidden City. It's not one of the famous halls. Most tourists never make it that far west, past the Hall of Mental Cultivation, all the way to the far western corner. Historically, it was a residence for the Empress Dowager. The Qianlong Emperor's mother, Empress Dowager Chongqing, lived there. But that was during the Qianlong era. After that, the story took a different turn. After Jiaqing's reign, Shoan Palace gradually fell into disuse. By the late Qing dynasty, during the Guangxu years, Shoan Palace was used to house retired palace maids, elderly women who had nowhere else to go. The court placed them in a row of single-story houses behind Shoan Palace, where they were left to live out their remaining years, or die.
In traditional Chinese culture, retired palace maids occupied a tragic social position. They had spent their youth serving the imperial family, but after the age of 25 or 30, they were considered too old for service. Those without families to return to had nowhere to go. The court would occasionally allocate unused palace spaces for them to live in, but they provided no medical care, no support. These women simply died there, slowly, one by one.
Old Joe later researched this at the Forbidden City's archives. He said the row of houses behind Shoan Palace had seen many deaths during the final years of the Qing dynasty. Not murder, not violence, just old age and illness, left untreated. Some of the maids died inside those rooms and weren't discovered until long after. After the Qing emperor abdicated in 1912, that row of houses was completely abandoned. During the Republic period, a few people lived in them. After 1949, they were briefly used as staff dormitories. But no one ever stayed long. The archives don't record why. By the 1980s, the Palace Museum had sealed the row of houses. Not just locked, they bricked up the doors. The same way they sealed Building 81 in Kaoyangmenai. Doors bricked shut.
After I found all this out, I had one question. A place that had been sealed for decades, why did the security manual specifically say no night patrol near this area? I didn't have an answer. But I felt like the answer was behind that brick wall.
Old Joe's night shifts weren't every night. The security team rotated, each person did 2 or 3 night shifts per week. The work itself sounds unremarkable, patrols. The Forbidden City has hundreds of infrared cameras, but security personnel still need to walk the grounds, checking locks, checking windows, checking for anything unusual. Old Joe said the Forbidden City during the day and at night are completely different worlds.
During the day, it's a sea of people. Tourists taking photos, guides shouting, children running around. But after the 5 o'clock clearing, once the last visitor leaves, the entire Forbidden City transforms. The silence isn't ordinary silence. It's absolute. Not even birds. Beijing has sparrows everywhere, but inside the Forbidden City, there are fewer animals than outside. I don't know if it's because the grounds are too vast, or if animals just aren't comfortable there. My first night shift, I was paired with a veteran named Old Lou. He'd worked at the Forbidden City for over a decade. At 11 o'clock at night, we left the guard station, flashlights in hand, and walked the patrol route. When we reached the front of the Palace of Heavenly Purity, I asked Old Lou, in all your years here, have you ever seen anything? He didn't answer right away. He walked a bit further, then said, the things I've seen, most of them weren't seen with the eyes. That was one of the most unsettling answers I've ever heard. I asked him what he meant. He said, you'll understand after you've been here long enough. Some things you hear. Some things you feel. But you don't see them. By the time you actually see something, it's already too late. At the time, I thought he was just being dramatic. Later, I realized he was telling the truth.
Around the 3rd month of Old Joe's service, the first unexplainable thing happened.
It was a night shift, and I was patrolling alone. My partner had taken the night off, family emergency. The team leader said I could go solo since the route was fixed. Just radio in if anything happened. A little after midnight, I was in the area of the Western 6 palaces. This includes the Palace of Gathered Elegance, the Palace of Earthly Respect, the Palace of Eternal Spring. During the late Qing, these palaces housed Empress Dowager Cixi, Consort Qin, and Empress Wanrong, all famous figures in history, and none of them had happy endings. When I reached the gate of the Palace of Eternal Spring, I heard a sound. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't voices. It was a low, continuous hum. Not something I heard with my ears, more like a vibration, coming up through the soles of my feet. My first thought was an air conditioner or a water pump running underground. But the Forbidden City's electricity is managed at night. Aside from security equipment, most areas have their power cut. I crouched down and pressed my palm against the stone tiles. The vibration was stronger. I walked along the outer wall of the Palace of Eternal Spring and found that the sound was strongest at the northwest corner, right next to the back wall of the Palace of Great Supremacy. I shone my flashlight toward the Palace of Great Supremacy. Nothing. The doors were locked. The seals were intact. I reported it to the guard station over the radio. They said no abnormal signals on their monitors. Told me to continue the patrol. I checked later, there are no large mechanical installations under the western 6 palaces. The nearest electrical room is several hundred meters away. No way that vibration could travel through the ground that far. When I mentioned it to old Lou, he said, the women who lived in that area, they weren't peaceful when they were alive. Don't expect them to be quiet after death. I asked, which women? He said, guess. I didn't say anything after that.
6 months into old Joe's time at the Forbidden City, something happened that truly began to unsettle him. It didn't happen to him directly. It happened to a new colleague, a young man named Little Chen. He was about 25, fresh out of the armed police. Bold, fit, and completely unfazed by everything when he first arrived.
One night, Little Chen was patrolling alone on the Eastern Long Corridor.
The Eastern Long Corridor is a narrow passage on the east side of the Forbidden City, stretching about 700 meters from the Eastern Glorious Gate to the Gate of Divine Might. Both sides are lined with towering red walls. During the day, it's just a narrow walkway. But at night, with the red walls closing in on both sides, only a sliver of sky visible overhead, and no lights, your flashlight beam stretches ahead, and the path seems to go on forever.
Little Chen was walking down the Eastern Long Corridor when he turned to look behind him. He said he didn't turn because he heard something. He turned because he felt someone watching him. The feeling was so strong he couldn't help but look back. About 20 meters behind him, standing in the middle of the corridor, was a figure. He said it wasn't exactly a person, it was the shape of a person. Black. The outline was blurred. Standing in the middle of the passage. He couldn't make out the face, couldn't see what it was wearing. Just a human shape. Little Chen said his first reaction wasn't fear, it was anger. He thought some tourist had hidden inside after closing time. He shone his flashlight and shouted, "Hey! Come out!" The figure didn't move. It didn't run. It didn't speak. It just stood there. Little Chen cursed and walked toward it. He covered about 10 meters. The figure was still there. He took a few more steps. The figure vanished. Not walked away. Not ducked into a doorway. It disappeared. Just like that. Little Chen stood in the middle of the corridor, looking in every direction. Nothing. 700 meters of narrow passage, high walls on both sides, no doors, no windows, nowhere to hide. When Little Chen came back that night, his face was pale. He told me one detail later. He said the way that figure stood, it didn't look like a living person standing. When a living person stands, there's a subtle sway. The rise and fall of breathing. A slight shifting of weight between the feet. That figure had none of that. It was perfectly still. Like it was nailed to the spot. He asked me, "Do you know what the Eastern Long Corridor was used for in the Qing dynasty?" I said I didn't. He said, that was the passage for the eunuchs. Palace maids and eunuchs weren't allowed to walk on the main palace roads. They had to use the side corridors. The Eastern Long Corridor was the eunuch's path. For hundreds of years, tens of thousands of eunuchs walked through that passage. Some of them got into trouble. They were dragged to the end of the corridor, beaten to death, and their bodies carried out through the Eastern Glorious Gate. When he told me this, his voice was flat. Like he was describing architectural history. But I noticed that after he finished, he didn't speak for a very long time.
The real incident happened that winter. Beijing winters are cold. At night, the temperature inside the Forbidden City drops to -10 or 15 degrees Celsius. Old Joe said winter nights are even quieter than summer, no insects, no rustling leaves, and the wind passing through the palace corridors makes a sharp, whistling sound, like something crying in the distance.
That night, I was patrolling the western side and ended up near Shoan Palace. I'd walked that route dozens of times. Nothing had ever happened. But that night was different. When I reached the iron gate at the outer perimeter of Shoan Palace, I saw that the lock was open. Not broken. It was hanging on the hasp, unsnapped. The lock itself was intact, like someone had unlocked it with a key and then not locked it back. My scalp went numb. Only the security team had keys to that gate. Nobody had been scheduled to go near Shoan Palace that day. And Shoan Palace was off the night patrol route, the team leader had explicitly said so. Which meant nobody should have been there. And nobody should have opened that lock. My first instinct was to back away and radio in. But I hesitated. I can't explain why. Maybe it was the darkness beyond that iron gate. I felt that if I didn't check what was inside, the question would eat at me forever. I pushed the gate open. The hinges hadn't been oiled in years. The sound was piercing in the silent night. I shone my flashlight inside. The front courtyard of Shoan Palace wasn't large. The ground was paved with blue brick. In the middle of the yard stood an old locust tree. The main hall doors were closed, the window paper already torn and decayed. I crossed the courtyard and stood in front of the main hall. The door wasn't locked. Just closed. I pushed it. The door creaked open. My flashlight illuminated the interior. Empty. Nothing. No furniture. No decorations. Just decades of dust. The corners were thick with cobwebs, in some places, the webs were as dense as gray cloth. I stood at the entrance. I didn't go inside. I can't explain why, but that empty hall gave me a feeling worse than any place I'd ever entered. Then I saw the small door at the back of the main hall. It led to the rear courtyard. And the rear courtyard was where the row of houses stood, the ones from the archives. Where the old palace maids were housed at the end of the Qing dynasty. The houses that had been bricked shut in the 1980s. That small door was also open. I walked to the small door, shone my flashlight through, and looked inside. The rear courtyard was tiny. The row of houses was low and dilapidated. The doors and windows were indeed bricked shut, crudely done. I swept my light across the courtyard. Nothing unusual. Just a row of sealed, ruined buildings. But when my flashlight passed over the window of the last house, I saw something. There was a gap between the bricks, about a finger's width. And something was moving inside that gap. Very slightly. Very slowly. Like something was pressed against the other side of that brick wall, sliding along the crack. I froze. I stood there, staring at that gap. The gap was black. But gradually, I became certain I wasn't imagining it, the blackness in the gap was changing. A deeper black was filling the space. The gap wasn't empty anymore. Something was pressed against the back of that brick wall. Looking out through the crack. My blood froze. I couldn't move. Not that I didn't want to, my body simply wouldn't respond. A completely dark room, sealed for decades. Something on the other side of the wall. Looking back at me through the gap. I don't know how long I stood there. Might have been seconds. Might have been minutes. I can't remember that part anymore. When I came to, I was standing outside the iron gate of Shoan Palace. The gate was closed. The lock was hanging on the hasp. Locked. I don't remember how I got out. I don't remember closing the gate or locking it. My next memory is standing at the door of the guard station, my hands still shaking. I didn't tell anyone that night. The next day, I went back to Shoan Palace to check. The iron gate was locked. The lock was intact. I tried pushing the gate, nothing unusual. I stood outside the gate and listened for a long time. No sound from inside. But I noticed one detail. The lock had a layer of dust on it. If I had actually opened it the night before, the dust would have been smudged, there would be fingerprints. But the dust on that lock was uniform. Complete. Like nobody had touched it. I couldn't tell if I had wiped off the fingerprints myself, or if I had never actually opened it at all.
Old Joe decided to investigate the Forbidden City's historical archives himself. Not out of curiosity, because he had discovered a pattern that wouldn't let him sleep.
I accessed the Palace Museum's internal archive system and requested the records for Shoan Palace. As security personnel, I didn't have authorization to access archives. But I had a friend who worked in the archive department, and I asked him to help. The timeline we reconstructed was this.
Shoan Palace was built in the 16th year of Qianlong's reign, 1751 AD. Qianlong renovated the palace to celebrate his mother Empress Dowager Chongqing's 60th birthday. The Empress Dowager lived at Shoan Palace for over a decade, until her death in 1777. After the Empress Dowager's death, the main hall of Shoan Palace was closed. Qianlong ordered that the palace be preserved in its original state, as a memorial to his mother. Subsequent emperors honored this tradition. The main hall of Shoan Palace had not been used since the 1770s. But the rear courtyard was different. The row of houses in the back continued to be used throughout the mid to late Qing dynasty. Archive records show that starting from the Daoguang era, the houses behind Shoan Palace were used to house retired palace maids who had nowhere else to go. This practice continued until the very end of the Qing dynasty. One particular document from the Guangxu era, written by the Imperial Household Department, recorded that 13 retired maids were housed in the Shoan Palace rear courtyard in a certain year and month. 6 of them died within half a year. The cause of death was listed as epidemic. But attached to that document was a separate sheet of paper with very small handwriting, like someone had added it secretly. My friend used a magnifying glass to read it. It said, "Strange sounds are heard here at night. The residents are disturbed. The doors and windows have been bricked shut."
That was during the Guangxu era. More than 100 years before the Palace Museum bricked up those same houses in the 1980s.
That row of houses had been bricked shut once already, during the Qing dynasty. And then again in the 1980s. Which means that in the past several hundred years, the same row of houses in the same location had been sealed at least twice. The first time, because of strange sounds at night, residents disturbed. The second time, no reason was recorded. I wanted to know what happened to those houses afterward. But I didn't look any further.
Old Joe worked at the Forbidden City for 2 years and 3 months. On the day he left, Old Lou called him aside and said a few words.
I know you looked into Shoan Palace. Everyone who's been at the Forbidden City for more than 6 months eventually looks into Shoan Palace. You've looked. Now you can leave.
I asked him, "How did you know I checked?"
He didn't answer. Instead, he continued. And what he said next, Old Joe remembers word for word. There's another wall behind those houses at Shoan Palace. You think bricking them up was the end of it? No. The position of those houses in the Forbidden City is unique. If you look at a satellite map, they sit at the intersection of 2 lines. One line runs south through the Hall of Mental Cultivation. The other runs north through the Gate of Divine Might. The Forbidden City is a city within a city. And every city has its own pattern. Some things aren't ghosts, aren't spirits, they come from the pattern itself.
I asked, "What pattern?"
The people who knew are no longer here.
I didn't ask again. I turned in my badge, walked out of the Forbidden City, and never went back.
After Old Joe left, we had a meal together. He told me all of this. Then he took out his phone and showed me a photo. Not the famous 1992 paranormal photo. one he had taken himself. The photo showed the iron gate of Shoan Palace. Rust-streaked black iron, red walls, a padlock on the hasp.
Look at the lock. Do you see it?
I couldn't see anything unusual. Just an ordinary padlock, hanging on an iron gate.
Look closely at the hasp itself.
I zoomed in. The hasp, the iron loop on the gate, had a deep groove worn into it. Not from a key. It looked like something had been rubbing against it repeatedly. A rope. A rope rubbing against that iron loop over a long period of time, wearing a smooth, shiny groove into the metal.
The first time I noticed this, I checked the old records. The iron gate was replaced in the 1950s. That where mark was there before the gate was replaced. Do you know what kind of situation leaves rope marks on a lock's hasp?
I said I didn't.
Someone tied a rope around this lock. Not to lock it. To tie the gate shut from the outside.
I didn't say anything.
The gate was tied shut from the outside. Which means the problem wasn't about keeping people inside from getting out. The question is, were they trying to keep something outside from getting in, or keeping something inside from getting out?
After he said this, old Joe was silent for a long time. Later, he deleted the photo. He said he had no use for it. But I don't know if he made a backup before deleting it. I asked him one last question: what do you think is inside those houses? He thought about it for a long time. Then he shook his head.
I've thought of many possibilities. Artifacts. Bodies. Or something I can't even name, something that shouldn't be seen. But whatever you call it, something that's been sealed behind brick walls for hundreds of years, dead or alive, it shouldn't be let out.
I asked him, do you believe those stories? The maids, the eunuchs, the legends of the Forbidden City at night?
He said something that stayed with me for a long time. In my 2 years at the Forbidden City, what scared me most wasn't the things I saw but couldn't explain. It was the things that were right in front of me that I just couldn't see.
There's one more place in the Forbidden City that I came across while researching, the Jinfei Well.
The Jinfei Well is on the eastern side of the Forbidden City, inside the Gate of Chastity and Obedience. Consort Zhen was the favored consort of Emperor Guangxu. In 1900, when the Eight-Nation Alliance marched on Beijing, Empress Dowager Cixi, before fleeing the capital, ordered that Consort Zhen be thrown into this well. Consort Zhen was only 24 years old when she died. In the first few years after her death, it was said that every night, the area around the Gate of Chastity and Obedience could hear a woman crying. The eunuchs on night duty didn't dare approach the well. Later, when Cixi returned from Xi'an, she ordered Consort Zhen's body to be retrieved, to cover up the crime, and hastily buried on the western outskirts of the city. But the legends about the well never stopped.
After the Republic period, the Forbidden City opened to the public. The Jinfei Well became a must-see attraction. Tourists stand at the well's edge and peer down. The opening is narrow, less than half a meter in diameter, covered by an iron grate. Inside, it's pitch black. You can't see anything. But the Forbidden City's guards have a saying that circulates among them: if you stand alone beside the Jinfei Well after closing hours, and you wait long enough, you'll hear a sound from the bottom of the well. Not crying. A sound of water. A dripping sound, like water droplets hitting a surface. But the Jinfei Well has been dry for decades. There's no water at the bottom.
I went to see the Jinfei Well once. Not at night, during the day. I stood at the edge and looked down. The well is deep. I couldn't see the bottom. The iron grate was old, the paint flaking off. I reached my hand over the grate and felt the air rising from the well. The air coming up from that well was cold. Several degrees colder than the surrounding air. Not the kind of cool shade you'd expect, it was a damp cold. Like the air from a cellar that's been full of water for years, never seeing sunlight. But the Jinfei well is dry. At least, that's what visitors are told. I didn't investigate further. There are too many such places in the Forbidden City. Every hall, every corridor, every well has a story behind it. You can't investigate them all.
Speaking of Forbidden City paranormal stories, I can't skip the famous 1992 photograph. I looked into this myself. In 1992, an ordinary tourist was visiting the Forbidden City with a film camera. When the photos were developed, one frame showed an extra person, a woman in Qing Dynasty court attire, standing under a palace corridor. The woman in the photo wore a pink cheongsam, her hair styled in the traditional Qing two-knot bun, head bowed slightly, hands clasped in front of her. Her posture was completely unlike a modern tourist. This photo went viral on the early Chinese internet. The Palace Museum's official response was, the photograph was either a forgery or an optical illusion caused by the shooting angle. But while researching, I found some follow-up information. A forum post by someone claiming to be a former Palace Museum staff member. He said that after that photo was taken, the museum held internal meetings to discuss it. The conclusion was not the photo is fake. The conclusion was unexplainable. He claimed the photo was sent to a research institute for analysis. The analysis found no evidence of tampering. The woman in Qing attire was present on the original negative. I can't verify this claim. But one fact is certain, after the 1992 photo incident, the Forbidden City closed parts of the Western Six Palaces for the entire year of 1993. The official reason was ancient building maintenance. But the maintenance period lasted a full year, and some of the Western Six Palace halls never reopened to the public after maintenance was supposedly complete.
When I heard this, I wasn't surprised. The Western Six Palaces. I told you. That area is wrong.
There have been other similar incidents. In 2003, a Japanese tourist took a photo that showed a child in Qing Dynasty clothing in the background. In 2009, a British tourist took a group photo in front of the Palace of Gathered Elegance, and a blurred white figure appeared behind them. These photos circulated online, but none achieved the fame of the 1992 image. What's interesting is that all of these photos were taken on the western side of the Forbidden City, west of the Hall of Mental Cultivation. Not a single one was taken on the eastern side or the central axis. I don't know what this means. But if these photos are genuine, it suggests that the Western Six Palaces, the area where Shoan Palace, the Palace of Gathered Elegance, and the Palace of Eternal Spring are located, is indeed different from the rest of the Forbidden City. It suggests that Shoan Palace and its surroundings are the most unusual corner of the entire Forbidden City. From the Qing Dynasty to the Republic to the present day, nobody has truly touched it. You stand at the gate of Shoan Palace, in front of a locked iron gate. Behind the gate, a main hall that's been empty for over 200 years. Behind that hall, a row of houses that have been bricked shut twice. You stand there, doing nothing, and you can feel that something is wrong. Like cold air seeping up from the ground.
You don't need to see a photo. Go stand in that area for a while. You'll feel it. That kind of feeling can't be captured by a camera.
I told him I'd read online that the reason so many paranormal events happen in the Western Six Palaces is that during the Qing Dynasty, disfavored consorts and punished maids were confined in those remote palaces. Some were locked up for 10 years or more, never seeing daylight. They went mad, they died, and their resentment stayed in those rooms.
That doesn't work. That kind of thing happened in every dynasty, in every imperial palace. But why has the Forbidden City kept so many legends? Not because more people died there. Because the Forbidden City is still here. 600 years of imperial palace. Never destroyed by war. Never rebuilt after fire. It's always the same buildings. Wood, brick, stone used for 600 years. When something is used for that long, it develops memory.
Memory?
I don't know how to describe it. Have you ever used an old wooden chair? A chair that's been sat in for decades, the wood develops a patina that paint can't reproduce. Buildings are the same. The walls remember the people who lived inside them.
That sentence stayed with me for a long time. Old Joe told me something about the water in the Forbidden City. There are 72 wells inside the Forbidden City. That's a well-known fact. But what most people don't know is that no two of those wells have the same water level. Some wells have water less than 2 meters from the opening. Others are 10 or more meters deep before you see water. And two wells right next to each other might have completely different water quality, one clear, one murky.
This isn't a paranormal phenomenon. The Forbidden City's underground water system is extremely complex. The soil layers are uneven, so water levels vary naturally from area to area.
But the old-timers at the Forbidden City have a saying, the wells with poor water quality are the ones that have something in them.
I asked old Lou about this once. He said he hadn't heard about water quality being related to paranormal activity. But he told me something else. Some of the wells in the Forbidden City were historically used for executions. The Jinfei well is the famous one. But there are others. During the Qing dynasty, when the court needed to dispose of a maid or low-ranking consort who had committed a serious crime, one method was to throw them into a well. No trial needed. No records needed. And the body would never be found. The wells connect to underground rivers. The body gets washed away, leaving nothing behind.
There are some wells in the Forbidden City that were sealed during the final years of the Qing dynasty and the early Republic period. Not covered with a lid. Filled in, from the bottom to the top, packed with crushed stone and lime. If a well has water, why would you fill it in?
I never investigated that. I didn't want to.
Old Joe said if you really want to experience the Forbidden City at night, you should go on a rainy day.
When it rains, the flagstone paths reflect the light. Rainwater drips from the eaves, hitting the stone, and the sound echoes back and forth between the empty halls. It's not a drip-drip sound, it's deeper, more continuous, like something beating a drum in the distance. One time when I was on night shift, there was a heavy rain. I stood under the white marble steps of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, taking shelter. The eaves of the Hall of Supreme Harmony are wide, and the rainwater flowed off the glazed tiles like a curtain. I stood behind the curtain of water, looking out at the square. I had a very strong feeling at that moment, like I wasn't a person of this era. I was wearing a raincoat, holding a flashlight, standing in front of a palace that had existed for 600 years. The emperors, ministers, eunuchs, and maids, they had stood under the same eaves, sheltering from the same rain. Same rain, same flagstones, same eaves. The people had changed. The buildings had not. Then I noticed something. In the southeast corner of the square, behind the rain curtain, there was a blurry shape. Not a human shape. Something smaller. Like a cat or a dog, crouching there. I shone my flashlight at it. The shape didn't move. The light was weak by the time it reached that corner through the rain. I couldn't tell what it was. I decided to go look. I walked down the steps, through the rain, across the square. Halfway there, I realized something was wrong. The shape wasn't getting bigger as I approached. It stayed the same size, in the same position. When I was about 10 meters away, I finally saw clearly. It wasn't a cat. It was a patch of discoloration caused by rainwater. The green bricks on the corner had grown a layer of dark moss, and the rain had washed it into an irregular shape. From a distance, it did look like a crouching animal. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned to walk back. But after 2 steps, I stopped. I looked back at that corner. The discoloration was clear when I arrived. But the rain was still falling. If it was just ordinary moss, the fresh rain should have changed its shape, washed it away, or diluted it. But the dark patch I had just seen, its outline was still complete. There's no way I was wrong. During the time I walked toward it, no rainwater had flowed across that dark patch. That's what he told me. But I noticed that when he told this part, his tone wasn't certain. He was trying to convince himself.
What was that patch of darkness? He doesn't know. I don't ask anymore. Some things, if you ask too many questions, it doesn't do you any good. While researching the Forbidden City, I found some things that old Joe didn't mention.
The Forbidden City's layout, according to feng shui theory, follows what is called the four symbols pattern. The purple Forbidden City was designed strictly according to feng shui principles, backed by Coal Hill, the black tortoise, fronted by the Golden Water River, the vermilion bird, with the ancestral temple on the left, the azure dragon, and the altar of land and grain on the right, the white tiger. This layout was established by Master Liao Junqing, the great feng shui master of the Yongle era of the Ming dynasty. But Shoan Palace's position in this feng shui layout is extremely unusual. The western side of the Forbidden City was the residence of the Empress Dowager and imperial consorts, Shoan Palace, Shokong Palace, Sinang Palace. In feng shui, this area is called the Western Six Palaces and belongs to the Yin principle. The eastern side, where the crown prince and imperial princes lived, belongs to the Yang principle. Yin and Yang should balance, each in its proper place. But Shoan Palace is too far west. It almost touches the western wall of the Forbidden City. In feng shui, a position that is extremely far to one side causes qi to accumulate without dispersing. When qi accumulates without dispersing over a long period of time, it creates problems. This isn't something mystical. It's like a room where the windows are never opened, the air never circulates, and the walls grow moldy and develop an odor. The Forbidden City's layout works the same way. In a palace without open windows, the longer time passes, the more accumulates.
Shoan Palace's main hall has been sealed for over 200 years. The rear courtyard houses have been bricked shut at least twice. While researching, I found another interesting detail. The famous 1992 paranormal photograph was taken on the northern side of the Forbidden City, near the Gate of Divine Might. Shoan Palace is on the south-southwest side. The two locations aren't close. But if you draw a line on a map of Beijing from the Gate of Divine Might to Shoan Palace, what does that line pass through? The five western places. The Palace of Double Glory. The Palace of Establishing Prosperity. These are all locations on the western side that historically have reputations for being unsettled. Is there any connection? I don't know. What do you think?
The Forbidden City's feng shui layout follows the principle of court in front, residence behind, ancestral shrine on the left, altar on the right. The three main halls on the central axis, the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Hall of Central Harmony, and the Hall of Preserving Harmony, represent the Yang side, symbolizing court and imperial power. The three rear palaces, the Palace of Heavenly Purity, the Palace of Union, and the Palace of Earthly Tranquility, represent the Yin side, symbolizing residence and family. The Yang side should be open and bright. The Yin side should be compact and secluded. But Shoan Palace's position takes Yin to its extreme. Not only is it in the rear residence area, it's the westernmost corner of that area. In feng shui theory, this kind of position is called solitary Yin. Solitary Yin does not generate life. Solitary Yang does not foster growth. When a position reaches the extreme of Yin, qi stagnates. Stagnant qi does not disappear. It finds a place to gather. Shoan Palace's rear courtyard is that gathering place. I didn't make this up. This is actual theory from traditional Chinese architecture. While researching, I found an internal report from the 1950s, written by an architectural expert commissioned by the Palace Museum. The report specifically mentioned the problem with Shoan Palace that the Qi openings, meaning the orientation and layout of the doors and windows, did not meet the ventilation requirements of traditional architecture. The report recommended a complete renovation.
But there was no record of any follow-up action. Shoan Palace was not renovated. Not demolished. Not even structurally repaired. It was simply locked up. Door locked. Windows sealed. Like everyone had silently agreed on one thing: don't touch it. Don't go near it. Pretend it doesn't exist. The story is almost over now. But I want to say this: if you visited the Forbidden City, what you saw is the same Forbidden City that old Joe saw. The same red walls, the same yellow tiles, the same sea of tourists. During the day, it's a magnificent ancient architectural complex. But at night, it's an empty city. Over 900 rooms, all dark. A 700-meter corridor, not a single light. High walls on both sides, a sliver of sky overhead. You stand in the middle of the eastern long corridor, with no end visible in either direction, walls pressing in on both sides, and the only source of light is the flashlight in your hand. When you turn your head, your own shadow moves across the wall in the beam of your flashlight. When you stop, the silence around you is so deep you can hear your own eyeballs moving in their sockets. That kind of silence isn't ordinary silence. It's a silence with weight. Like something large is crouching beside you, listening too. I asked old Joe later, if you had the chance, would you do it again? Work security at the Forbidden City?
Yes. I would.
Why?
Because people who've spent time in the Forbidden City see the world differently from other people. Not because they've gained something, because they've lost a layer. The layer called "I thought I saw everything."
I'm not sure I fully understand what he meant. But I think he's right. The Forbidden City housed 24 emperors. Countless maids and eunuchs walked those corridors. Some people were born there. Some people died there, old and forgotten. Over 500 years. Over 900 rooms. Thousands of acres of land. To say that nothing happened in all that time, that would be the strangest thing of all. Some of the things that happened were written into history books. Some were written into archives. And some were bricked up behind walls. The things behind those walls may never be uncovered. Or perhaps they were never meant to be. After I finished writing this story, I called old Joe again. I wanted to ask him one more question. In his 2 years at the Forbidden City, walking countless paths, was there any place he himself was afraid to go? He was silent for a moment. Then he said, yes. Where?
The entrance to that row of houses at Shoan Palace. Every time I passed that area, I took a detour. Not because I was afraid of seeing something, but because I always felt that behind that locked door, there was something listening to the footsteps passing by outside. I didn't want it to know I was out there.
After I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long time without moving. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day. Wukong's archive, where short is the story, but long is the life.